So this is the second and final installment of filming the Mandalorian helmet, which is also a Bluetooth speaker. You can see I just put the speakers back in place. They just pop into place. You can epoxy them in place, but I didn't want to have them permanently attached. In case something went wrong, you can pop them back out. Now, this has 3 coats of clear on it. I potentially am going to put a 4th coat on there, but for the purposes of this video, I'm not going to put that in there, mainly because the visual difference between 3rd and 4th coat is something you'll notice with the naked eye, but not necessarily on camera. It won't look much different to you. But like I said, the bulk of this last part of the video is going to be the detail carving. I try to get as many good shots as possible, but since I was carving this in the round and constantly working on it in the round, the camera gets in the way very quickly, and I don't sacrifice my projects for camera angles. So the detail of it is a little bit further away than I would necessarily like, but like I said, I tried to get as much as possible and some good shots. So to start off this video, I'm just going to be cleaning up the bulk of that blockiness that I added to the ears. I'm just following the curve I've already created on the top of the head with a chainsaw. Like I've said many times in these videos, the chainsaw just makes quick work of removing a lot of this material. That's what I use for roughing out a lot of things. So you can see I'm just kind of cutting down that piece. So now that the head is pretty well shaped with the helmet, you can see I marked a circle where the circle of the ear is, and then I'm transferring that to the helmet I have. You could see just by looking at it, the angles are pretty close, and that is where that angle is going to be. My one complaint about the Rockler kit is the hole sizes are off sizes. I believe this was 2 7/8, and I have a hole saw kit, but I didn't have the sizes for this. I wish they would have been more standard sizes. So what I ended up doing was doing a 2 and I believe it was 3/4 inch, and then I just had to kind of take out some material with the Dremel. So that is rough carving the one ear, and then I'll do the same on the other side. You could see with the hole saw, I ended up marking the outer rim of the ear, because that is what the outer rim of the speaker is, which is 3 inches. So I used a 3-inch hole saw bit to mark that outer ear, and then I'm just going to follow that line with my oscillating tool. And that's the easiest way to make that stop cut in order to remove that material. So I could go down with the oscillating tool and then remove the bulk. And I know that this tool needs some new blades. I'm really bad at certain forms of shop maintenance, and one of them is sharpening blades and buying new blades. So then I could go through with this long spindle rough bit. It's a rough burr that I've been using to remove the bulk of the material. I like it because it's so long. Sometimes with these tools, the tool itself gets in the way of the carving. So because that bit's so long, I was able to get the right angles, and then I could clean it up with my angle grinder. And I could go through and clean up that edge with a smaller bit. I can't remember if I said this in the original video, but I'm using a fancy style Dremel tool that someone gave me. I also have a die grinder, which I'm also carving with. You do not need both of those to do carving. You could carve something like this by hand. With end grain like this, it would be pretty difficult and take a long time, and your tools would have to be quite sharp. I'm using the die grinder just because I'm using 2 different diameter shanks. So these are 1/4 inch shanks, and the other ones I'm using are the thinner shanks. So instead of changing out the collet on my Dremel every other time, I could just have the thicker shanked tools in the die grinder, and then the thinner ones in the Dremel. It just makes life a little bit easier. I could switch back and forth much easier. So then I'm just going through and cleaning up my lines. Most of the bits I'm using are some type of carbide burr. I go on Amazon and just buy the accessory kits. It will give you different size ones for like $12 or $13, and you can kind of play around which ones work the best for you. For the price, they work pretty well. I don't always go to the store and buy the actual Dremel style bits. So then at this point I have this starting to get fleshed out, and I'm going to clean it up. At this point I did not like how much walnut was at the top of the head. I thought that circle was going to be a little bit higher up. So while I was doing this, I decided that I was going to cut out those and piece in that patch in order to make it look a little bit better. Right here I'm just showing you, as I carve, you could see the arch, especially on something like this where it's symmetrical. So I'll look over the top of something and I'll follow my eyes all the way up the piece, and if that arch is symmetrical on both sides, you'll know the helmet is symmetrical. You could see the same thing in the front. On this angle, you could see the right side has a little more material just from looking bird's eye view down at the arch, and I'll know that that's what I need to clean off in order to get this symmetrical. So then here I'm just transferring the lines up the helmet, because there's this strip on the Mandalorian helmet that goes across the top. This is difficult to do because of the arch. And then I'm just going through with a carbide burr and I'm creating that line. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating that line, and then I'll feather out that material to the edge of the helmet. So I'm not necessarily going to take down the whole top part of that helmet to the line I create. I'm just going to feather it out so it looks like it's creating a high point, but I'm not necessarily removing that much material from the entire helmet. So then I'm using a thicker bit here to feather that line out. You can see I'm not removing material from the whole arch of the helmet, just that one space is enough to feather it out to create the depth of that strip on the top of the helmet. So this is the part where I said, like I said, where I decided I didn't like having that huge block of walnut at the top. So I'm using the oscillating tool to cut that out, and I'll fill it in with strips. If you plan your measurements a little bit better than myself, you won't have to do the part where you add the walnut in. You won't have to do this part either. So I could take that strip out and clean up that edges. Those edges make it symmetrical. And then I had to take a little bit out of the front as well in order to fit these chunks in, but this is the same material I had left over. I just pieced them in there so that now, instead of having that big chunk of walnut, the pattern will match a lot more with the blocky material. I did that on both sides, and then I could go through and remove the bulk and then clean it up once again. This was kind of a pain, but I was really happy I did it. I liked the way it looked much better than having that big chunk of walnut there. And even though there's still a big chunk left, once you take out the section for the ear, it really kind of disappears. So that's what the patch looks on either side. I was pretty happy with how it turned out. So then I could go through and finally remove this material to put the speakers in. Like I said, the hole saw sizes for these were off sizes and I didn't have them, so I used a size smaller, and then you'll see I'll create a lip with the Dremel tool and able to get the speaker in there. This material is pretty thick, so I went halfway down, chiseled out the bulk, and then I could finish going through. So like I said, there's the lip I had to create with the Dremel, just to get the speaker to fit in there, and then the outer rim is the exact size of the speaker, which was 3 inches. So that's how that fits in there. Then for the back, it was the same thing, but it was a pain to Dremel out that outer lip. So for the back hole, I actually went oversized, so it fits in there snugly. And then I'll just put some tape, some thick padded tape on the portion in the back in order to get it to stay in there. You can see it still fits in place pretty nicely. And then this is just trying out the speaker. I'll show you at the end of the video what this sounds like. This is how far I got before I gave it. I did give it to my brother-in-law as an actual gift. I just told him he had to return it to me so I could finish it. But I was pretty happy. It was very easy to work. You just go into your phone, start playing some music, and turn on your Bluetooth setting, and it streamed right to the speaker and sounded really good. So then this is once I got it back after the holidays. I'm just going through and cleaning it up. It was very close to done when I gave it to him. There was just some fine-tune fixing to do on something like this. Making mid-century modern furniture I find to be very similar. it's pretty simplistic. There's not a lot going on, and that could sometimes be your downfall because you can hide things in details. When the lines are very clean, if it doesn't look perfect, your eye spots it very quickly. So this is just, there's some detail on the back of the helmet, carving that. I didn't get a ton of that because my camera died, so that's why there's only a little bit. And then there's two very thin stripes going down the center of that detail on the top of the helmet. So I used a round disc sort of bit to create that so I could get those thin lines. And then these, I don't actually know what these are called. Someone gave these to me. They're abrasive sanding discs that fit on a 1/4 inch shank. And I'm just using that because there's a chamfer on the edge of that piece. I'm chamfering that. And then I'm going through with 80 grit sandpaper on my oscillating sander to really clean up the surface. Luckily, there's enough bare surface without detailing that I could get about 85% of the sanding on this done with an oscillating sander, which was really nice. So I was very happy with the original glue up and how that went, but there was still some little holes to patch, so I'm just put a little bit of wood dust and some epoxy, and I'm just going to patch all those holes. You could do this also with just regular wood glue. I used epoxy just because this will set up in 10 minutes and I could keep working. Now that it's winter time, my shop is usually only around 45 to 50 degrees. So if I had used a wood putty in this, which I also make in the shop with sawdust, it would take all day to dry. So then once that dries, I could go through, and now I'm going to sand this to 120. So you can just sand down all those epoxy high spots. I really go crazy with filling in hairline cracks with epoxy. It just looks really good. The finish for this, I'm using a tung oil varnish. Like I said, I'm put 3 coats on it. It's very easy to apply, and it will also give it a little bit of a durable finish because it's not just tung oil, it's a tung oil finish, so it has a little bit of varnish in it. So I'll put this on, and then there's really not much sanding to do in between if you like the way the surface looks, which I did. So I just applied 3 coats just like this. So then as I was working on this, I noticed because of the pattern, like I said in the intro, it was kind of hard to pick up on the details because your eye is focusing on the blocks of the material. So in order to make some of the details pop, I did go through and add some black paint. I did this on top of the varnish so that if worse comes to worse, it would be easier to take off. But I did like the way it looked. I just kind of pinstriped some of the edges, and the bulk of it was that middle material. Then I could go through and press fit those speakers back in and put this all together. So this is pretty easy. It just, all the connections just snap right into place. You can't really tell in the video, but I do have a piece of padded tape on there so that that back piece fits in nicely. So that was the clip of the speaker working. I'm going to show you guys what it sounded like. I tried to shuffle through really quick on my iPhone because I know that if you have music on here too long, it could be copyright claims. So I think if you keep it under, I believe I've heard 10 seconds, they won't bother you. So my brother got me hooked on Philip Glass a couple years ago, so that is what was playing on Pandora. It's great shop music. It kind of keeps my temper at bay as well.